Dead TS. Special Hurricane Edition. Here we're a little short-staffed. Myself here under the hurricane lamps, having a hurricane party, and I'm joined by Mr. Russell Latham and Mr. Brad Milo. How are you today, stars?
Ain't no party like a hurricane party.
Yeah, I'm dry. I can't say much for the rest of everybody.
You guys are far enough inland to not be affected by the storm of the century, or the Frankenstorm, or the zombie, or superstorm, or whatever they're calling it now.
Yeah, what does Frankenstorm mean?
I think it's just a take on Halloween.
Okay, I can deal with that.
But anyway, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about quite a few things Walking Dead related. But first, before we get to that, Russ, would you, in brief, tell us who our wonderful sponsors are, please?
Yes, our sponsor for this episode is Discount Comic Book Service. That's DCBService.com, where you can save tons of money on your comic orders every month. Trades, hardcovers, toys, trinkets, whatever you want. They've got tons of stuff. You can go to their website at DCBService.com. I love the Excel order form because I'm just kind of funny that way and like things neat and orderly and get totals. Some of the things to highlight this month, like we talked about last week on Walking Dead related for this month. And if you hurry quick, you can still get your October order in. The November orders will be out soon, so we'll have all kinds of cool stuff to talk about next week. But just again, some shout outs real quick. The Walking Dead Omnibus Hardcover Volume 4, retail price of $100. This is a 2 hardcovers. So this is you're gonna get 24 issues in a very nice oversized slipcase edition for 40% off at $60. So definitely a good deal on that. They also have the Volume 3 hardcover for 40% off. So if you want to just kind of double dip and get caught up. Also, Walking Dead number 105, so continuing the monthly track. Regular price $2.99, you get it for 40% off at $179. Most Marvel, DC, and Image Comics monthly comics are going to be 40% off of either the $2.99 or $3.99 price. Every month, there's a great special going on this month for DC hardcovers and trades. All of the DC hardcovers and trades, which is most of the Vertigo stuff as well, is 50% off. So this is some great stuff. And then, of course, the Marvel Now bundles you can get at great discounts. If you buy them all, I believe it's a 50% discount if you buy the bundle of Marvel Now titles. So definitely check it out, DCBService.com. We thank them for their support.
And if you're a first-time customer of DCB Service, or you haven't ordered anything from them in a year, use the code WD8, and you'll save another 8% on top of your purchase already. And even if you're not into the comic at all on The Walking Dead, they have a really cool Michonne hoodie I saw on their website with Michonne and her 2 pets emblazoned on the back of the hoodie. They had Rick Grimes costume if you want to cosplay as Rick Grimes. A lot of cool stuff. A Carl Stay in the House t-shirt I thought was funny. So check it out, DCB Service, and save an extra 8% with that code.
All right, so again, good point, Jim, on the discount code. So I think now that we've gotten the business taken care of, we're ready to get to business. So I'll hand it back to you, Mr. Dietz.
Well, this episode of the third episode of the third season is called Walk With Me, and it's interesting. It's the first episode that isn't centered really on Rick and the group. It's not. It's all Andrea and Michonne centered. And basically, they see a crash helicopter, they go to the site, and they meet the governor, and they get to go to Woodbury. And we can see a lot of elements from the comic kind of retranslated now in the show. It's a really good episode. How were the ratings on this episode? Were they still steadily climbing as we've seen through the season so far?
Well, that's a great question, Jim. And if Jordan was here, I'm sure he'd be able to answer that because that seems to be his superpower, is finding the ratings the day after they air. So I don't know. I'm going to blame it on Frankenstorm, and I guess we'll catch up ratings next week, which is odd because normally they do a pretty good job of keeping those updated. But with all the other news going on, that probably just wasn't high on everybody's list.
Yeah, everybody who's listening has to realize this is like Voltron running on only 3 lines this week because of the hurricane. So
apparently, John and Jordan are right in the thick of things, especially John at the moment. Didn't he send us? He sent us an email earlier saying something about his neighbor's tree flying through his fence and crushing John's children's swing set.
Yeah. He said if the wind was blowing the other way, it would have gone through his house. So
that's ridiculous.
Crazy stuff.
Well, let's pick up the slack and let's get into this episode. Again, this episode is called Walk With Me, like Jim said. The episode opens with a helicopter, interestingly enough, flying over the countryside. We see inside there's some military guys in there. They begin to have some mechanical problems with the helicopter. It crashes. And
question real quick before we get to the crash and everything. Do you guys think this is the same helicopter we've been seeing over and over? Like the same guys using the same, and that's why it broke down? It's because it just over it's been like 8 to 10 months since the outbreak that the helicopter just broke down because of maintenance because it's been so long. Is it the same helicopter? And you know what I mean? At the end of the last season, we saw the helicopter, and first season.
It's possible.
Yeah, I would say it's possible, even probable, that it might be the same helicopter that we saw recently. But I wouldn't say it's Well, I was about to say I wouldn't say it's the one we saw at the beginning, but now that I think about it, there was what have we decided? As we learned in this episode, an 8 months gap. Is that possible? He said 8 months. They were on the road. Maybe they were seven.
8, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe they were just guessing at the point. They really didn't know because they'd been around for so long. But I would say...
I know Andrea in this episode also says that her and Michonne have been together for 8 months?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So if it's going to be a helicopter, I was going to say probably the one that we saw at the end of last season. It wouldn't be the one at the beginning, but...
Well, the one we saw at the end of last season was the same one that was in the premiere because remember it started over the city. And that's how they showed the herd gathering. They backed it all the way up to that point and then kind of brought it forward to say, okay, this is how these herd of zombies just showed up. They didn't just show up out of nowhere. They it started with the helicopter and then kind of went from there. They did make a point with the helicopter with the army guy saying that they were part of a convoy and they launched the helicopter to kind of go ahead or do some reconnaissance or something like that. So it appears that it was a part of a regular military convoy. So this thing was either being carried on a truck and then was used kind of sparingly to scout ahead. So it could very well be the same helicopter we saw in seasons 1 and 2.
That's true. And I had forgotten that the helicopter we saw at the end of last season was actually the beginning because they went back to the beginning of the story with that episode, like you said, following the herd over the months. Turned out that guy's part of the National Guard, as we'll find out here in a little bit.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you guys thought that was the same helicopter we've been seeing all along.
I never even thought about it, but I don't see why it couldn't be. So Andrea and Michonne see the crash. Andrea it looks very sick. They start walking towards the crash. They find the crew dead and the pilot heavily injured. Michonne hides Andrea in the bushes along with her pets, and she stealthily walks towards the crash to take a look around. She finds one of the soldiers in half, and it kind of gives her pause. That was a pretty grody effect.
Yeah, pretty graphic for television. I thought to see a person eviscerated and ripped in half like that. Just incredible. I mean, I'm just thinking 20 or even 10 years ago, there would have been an outcry on television. Now, that was, pretty brutal.
As Michonne is checking it out, she hears, are there some vehicles? Yeah, some vehicles drive up, so she runs back and hides in the bushes with Andrea. And we see a handful of big burly men get out, one of which we will come to know as the governor later in the episode. They're looking around, they watch from the bushes. They see these men kill one of the crash survivors that's still alive. They bring that up later, we'll talk about that. This concerns them, obviously, because they don't know what we know. And just about the time they're about to leave, Michonne's pets start making noise, and chains are rattling and clanking, and they're getting agitated. And without a second of hesitation, Michonne beheads both of them to keep their presence quiet from these strange men that they've just found. I thought, she's been dragging these pets around for so long. And then it was just a split second. There was no question about whether they were that important to her because she immediately just took them out.
And again, another great Michonne move, just very much the Michonne we know and love from the comic, just very quick, decisive with the katana and back down.
As soon as that happens, it appears that they've saved themselves from being discovered. When lo and behold, a familiar voice from behind Andrea comes in play, and immediately I start giggling because I know exactly who it is. You can just tell Michael Rooker's voice is.
When Merle gets the drop on him, she's going for her blade already. You know what I mean? By the time he has the blade on, the blade to her neck, she's already grabbing for the katana, and he's like, nice and easy. But I mean, she is, very much on it. It's really, really cool scene.
Now, did you guys think on that one shot of Andrea, we don't see Merle yet, but we see her listening to his voice, and it almost looks like she recognizes the voice, and she's like, I can't believe this is happening.
Yeah.
She turns around and sees who it is, and she just faints. I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah.
Oh, but he gets that. Rooker gets that great line. How about a hug for your old buddy Merle?
Yeah.
And then she faints.
And we see
that was just great.
We see his Bruce Campbell type appendage on his right arm, and then she faints. I thought that was a really funny scene when she did that.
Plus, there's that great part where he's like, Blondie, looking good, and then a walker comes up, and he, without any hesitation, even really looking at the walker, he just puts the knife from his Evil Dead arm right into his brain. Great scene.
Yeah, it was a cool move because he really didn't pay it any mind until it was literally right on top of him. That's how confident and such a badass that Merle is. He's just like, yeah, until I feel it breathing on my neck, I really I'm not even worried about it.
Yeah, he seems very used to this situation, like he's had months of it under his arm, so to speak. So we rejoin them when Andrea regains consciousness. They're in a vehicle, and we hear some people talking. We hear Andrea ask for Michonne. Michonne says, I'm right here. She's looking out the window through her blindfold. We kind of see a guy standing.
Well, as she's coming to Woodbury, she sees the bodies hanging up in the trees.
Yeah.
Outside of the truck. And again, another image from the comic. They're just really kind of iconic. I remember seeing it in the show. And then we just see glimpses of her coming in wrecked cars. Then kind of, everything's kind of, you kind of learn about Woodbury as they do, because as they come in, they aren't really seeing it until, they wake up and they start asking questions.
Right. She wakes up. There's a doctor lady in there taking care of her. Then Merle comes back in, asks the doctor to leave, and the three of them have a chat. Merle tells him how he managed to escape from Atlanta and made his way to Woodbury, where he has become the governor's right-hand man, so to speak. Andrea tells Merle about everything that's gone on with their group. It's interesting, when she lists all the names of the people that had died, she didn't mention Shane. I wonder if that was deliberate.
Yeah.
Or did she even know? Because as it happened, I mean, she never reconvened with everybody at the, beside the dying fire. She never got back together with the group after that point. So she might not even know if Shane is dead.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
That's true. Yeah.
You're exactly right. That's why she didn't mention it. She mentions Amy dies.
Yeah, she mentioned her last, which, fitting. But it was funny because when she's naming everybody off, I was like, okay, they can't be that clumsy that they're going to forget Amy. And then she named Amy last. And then it was kind of an odd moment because Merle says, she was a good kid or something like that. So I just, it was a very un-Merle-like moment right there.
Well, he's got a brother, and he can imagine what it would be like to lose Daryl, and kind of has, to some degree.
Yeah.
It's interesting, too, when we saw Merle before, he was high off his ass on medication, and then he was, sunstroked in the heat, strapped to the top of the building or whatever. So this is, a much calmer Merle, you know what I mean? This is more just like you said, very un-Merle Merle, but it's just a calmer, more, he's kind of found his place at the governor's side, you know what I mean? He feels very confident there.
Did you notice, it looks like Michael Rooker has lost a lot of weight?
He has. I mean, when I saw him at Austin Comic Con on Sunday, he definitely looks like he's slimmed down. You can see it in his, in his face. And just in his, his neck. I mean, he definitely looks like he's slimmed down quite a bit. Especially from some of his older roles, like I think even Walking Dead season 1. But in the mid '90s, I guess you saw him in Mallrats if you're a Kevin Smith fan, and he even mentioned that on the panel that he was definitely heavier.
At this point, the governor comes in, introduces himself, not by name. We learn that later. Lets them know that they are not prisoners. Do you see bars on the doors and stuff like that? You can have your weapons when you leave out the front gates. She says, "Show us the way," and he takes them outside, and they get a glimpse of what's going on.
Well, this is when he first says, "Walk with me," too, which is, he says it to him a few times as the episode goes on, and each time he's showing him a different facet of Woodbury and what he's created and what he's done there.
I missed an important point. Before they leave the room and go outside, Andrea calls him on killing the pilot, and he's, they are unaware that you turn no matter what, and this is when they find out that this is the case. This is when the governor says, "It don't matter. We're all going to turn." So they have to deal with that knowledge now. They go outside. This is when we hear somebody refer to him as the governor, and she says, "They call you that?" And he says, "Some nicknames stick, whether you want them to or not." The town is secure, plenty of food and water. They have electricity. They've got guns. They've got weapons. Michonne, however, is not impressed still. You can tell she's...
Well, she even takes her aside and says to her, "I don't trust him." And then one time they talk to each other, that Michonne just does not trust the governor at all.
Yeah, that's the next morning when they've had a night's sleep. Andrea looks a little better. Andrea's like, just give it a day. You can tell she's enjoying not having to run. She's enjoying feeling a little better. Then we get some more interesting information about the governor and things that are going on. There's a secret building or something where they have a experiment type of thing going on. What would you guys call this?
Well, it's this guy Milton. He's like one of his headmen or whatever. And he has him set up in a lab, and he's kind of experimenting on stuff, and he's kind of done forensics on Michonne's pets. And realizes that she was smart. She was using them not only for packing but for camouflage. That she'd deliberately taken off their arms and their jaws. And he also another good point in the laboratory scene. The governor's like, "Well, why haven't they started to death? It's been 18, 10 months or something since this all started." And the guy says they are starting to death. It just takes them a lot longer to do so. So that kind of explains why how the zombies are able to go on and on without consuming brains.
It turns out the the wounded pilot from the plane crash is here. The governor is asking him some questions, and the pilot reveals that he used to be part of the National Guard refugee camp. While their camp was well supplied and protected, somebody inside the camp turned into a walker and created a panic, causing the defenses to fall. Only a small group of them were able to escape. The pilot tells the governor where they were, because the governor says, "You tell me where they are. I promise you, if they're alive, I'll bring them back and we'll keep them safe." As we learn later, the governor has different ideas.
Yeah, and that was interesting because it's something we kind of speculated in the preview for the next week, last week, that he was either talking probably to, we thought, Michonne or Andrea, and that he was talking to somebody that was going to reveal the location of where Rick and his crew were, or something else. And so that was kind of cool to see how sometimes when they put these previews together, your mind starts going and you think you've got it figured out and know what they're doing, and then when you see it, for real, it's something completely different. So I thought that was kind of a cool twist where you got the same line, but because it had a different, it was to a different person, completely outside the normal group. It just kind of made you think a little bit.
I've noticed that they do that a lot with these previews. Every episode, I think I know what's going to happen, and then I don't, because the preview was deliberately misleading, and I approve of this.
Something real quick that happens also in that laboratory scene, Merle talks to the governor about Rick's group, about, well, she came from a group of, guys, and he went, and the governor's immediately interested, wants to know, all about them, and that's why they end up having breakfast together.
Yep. The next morning, the governor and Milton join Andrea and Michonne for breakfast. Andrea is receptive to the governor's charisma and charm, but Michonne, obviously, still is suspicious. Is anybody else creeped out a little bit by Milton?
Yeah.
He reminds me of the guy. Did you guys ever see George Romero's Day of the Dead?
Yeah, oh yeah.
I saw it once long ago.
This guy reminds me of the scientist in that, who just wants his zombies as an experiment and a science project,
Did any of you guys think that maybe something was in the tea that they were giving the girls? I did for a little bit, and then I was like, well, they're drinking it also. So I don't know. There was some weirdness going on with the scene that really kind of...
Well, the governor made a point about the tea earlier. He's like, well, that's why I keep you around for this and for your tea. And then he gives them a cup of tea. So I guess he's like either very particular about tea, or maybe there is something to that. I don't know.
Yeah, I tend to be very suspicious of anything, especially, this is where having some foreknowledge of the comics, maybe, on one hand, it maybe makes you a little too, on one hand, it makes you look a little too hard when maybe there's nothing there. But on the other hand, it's kind of cool because you just really never know. Like, it's like something's going to happen, but you're not sure what it is. And in this instance, at least as far as we know now, it turned out to be nothing. But it's kind of cool to have your wheels kind of spinning to see if it's going to materialize into something.
Yeah, sometimes I find myself wishing that I'd never read the comic, so I wouldn't be constantly filled with this sense of anticipation and expectation.
Well, I mean, look, this episode's a good testament as to why, even if you have read the comic, why the television show is so worthwhile on its own. This is a very different interpretation of the governor than what we saw in the comics. This until like the very last scene in here, he seems like a very, very much down-home kind of guy. In Woodbury in the comics, the governor was much, much different. So I mean, even though we've read the comics and we enjoyed them, I can enjoy the TV show for what it is on its own, because it's a very different interpretation of what happens in those same character beats.
Yeah, completely. I agree. There was an interview I saw with David Morrissey, who plays the governor, on AMCTV.com, and it was either in the video interview portion that I saw or it was the text interview that I read, but he mentions the fact that his governor is different from the comic book governor in that when we meet the governor in the comic, he is the way he's going to be throughout the rest of the comic. And his take on this TV character is that we will see him over the next several episodes evolve into the man that we know. And I think we've started to see signs of that with this episode for sure. But he does seem a bit friendlier, a bit nicer than his comic book counterpart. All right, so...
they have breakfast.
Yes, they have breakfast. Later, we see the governor... Later, we cut to a group of military men, turns out to be National Guard, and we find out that this is the group that our pilot came from, and we see the governor driving up in a car, waving a white flag out the window, looking very innocent.
Well, before we get to that, we get to the. I want to mention. I'm sorry. Right before that, we get a confrontation between Andrea and Michonne there. Michonne obviously does not trust the governor in any possible way, and Andrea's willing to kind of give him a chance. And they're kind of at different, opposite ends on that. You know what I mean? And they're kind of, after being together in solidarity as a team for as long as they have now, they're dissenting because Michonne does not trust the governor at all, and rightfully so, as we find out in the next scene. And Andrea kind of wants to believe in the safe haven that they made at Woodbury.
I'm glad you brought that up because it just made me remember, obviously because I missed it, but it made me remember that one of the governor's men that was outside their bedroom that night, he's following him through the town. He's got that really wacky hair. What do you make of this guy? You think he's interested in Michonne, or do you think he's just distrustful of these newcomers, or what do you think's going on here?
Or the governor's told him to keep an eye on him.
All of the above.
Yeah, I would say all the above.
Real quick on the governor showing up waving the white flag. For whatever reason, it kind of gave me a Superman 2 moment when Luthor comes in after the three villains have crashed into the Daily Planet and are kind of holding everybody at bay, and Luthor comes in and kind of pulls out his handkerchief and starts waving it around, kind of like this unsuspecting looking person is going to come and just wants to have a chat. I don't know, it just kind of struck me that way.
Mr. Luthor, he drives up, he gets out, he was waving the flag and says, "You're a pilot. We found him, we saved him. The other guys not so much. I'm sorry about that. But he told us where you were." And I don't remember exactly what he says, but he makes them very comfortable with his presence and being there. They offer him something, and he says, "Nah, we'll just take everything else." He doesn't say these words, but these are the feelings that I get when I remember the scene. And he just, out of nowhere, just pulls a gun and shoots the commanding officer in the head. All his cronies are hiding out all around. Everybody is dropping left and right, bullets flying. They're obviously overwhelmed.
Great shot as the governor pulls out his gun and takes his first shot of two bodies falling almost in slow-mo as the governor's not even breaking his stride, walking toward the camera. It's a really cool effect and a cool shot.
Yeah, it definitely was. There was some really good camera work, some good editing in this. Before you know it, the military is completely dead. And here's where we get probably our first big clue, big sign, big tease that the governor is not quite maybe the man that he's trying to portray to us as viewers up to this point, and to the people of Woodbury and Andrea and Michonne.
You think?
Yeah.
He just murdered a bunch of guys in cold blood for their ammunition and their jeeps.
Right.
You think maybe he's not such a nice guy? It was funny, too, because his crew, if you look at his crew when they go to take out the National Guard guys, there's a governor who is like the evil Rick. There's an evil Asian guy who's like Dark Glenn. There's a big black guy who's like Dark T-Dog.
Yeah.
And then there's Merle who's like evil Daryl.
It's like mirror. Yeah, it's like a mirror universe.
Right. It's like Mirror Mirror, the famous Star Trek episode where they had evil Kirk and Spock. They had the facial hair and the good Kirk and Spock did not. But I just thought it was weird that they have like a counterpart for every one of our group in their group.
That's very observant, and I approve of that observation. The governor returns to Woodbury and basically lies to the town and says to them, we went to find these guys to bring them back. They were all dead. This should teach us a lesson that we need to stick together. We are essential to each other's survival. We have to look out for each other. We have to watch out for each other. I got your back. You get my back. You get your neighbor's back. Just pouring it on thick. And I got to say, at this point, I've already said his name, but now I'm drawing a blank. David Morrissey. There we go. I've never seen this guy. Never heard of this guy. He's British. Yes.
Yes.
Have you guys ever seen him in anything?
Yeah, he was in an episode of Doctor Who called, I think it was The Other Doctor or The Two Doctors, and he played a guy that, spoiler alert for Doctor Who, but he played a guy that came in contact with the Doctor at some point, and I think it was either knocked unconscious or some sort of a storm or something like that happened, and he thought he was the Doctor in like the 1800s, and he did a really good job. I mean, he definitely has the chops, and he played this very sweet, humble kind of guy. So that's when he was first listed as cast as a governor. It kind of made me pause a little bit, because knowing what the governor looks like in the comics and his disposition in the comics, and then contrasting that with what I saw this guy in Doctor Who, it just didn't really jive. But after the episode, I'll kind of give my thoughts on what I think about the casting of Morrissey as a governor, in general, just so we don't bog down here. But yeah, he's got the chops. I'll put it that way.
I was going to say as much, but I'll save more of my thoughts for that later. But yeah, I'm extremely pleased with his acting ability, his portrayal. He's obviously British. He does a really good job hiding his accent, just like Andrew Lincoln does. But I've noticed a lot of times, if I close my eyes, then I would think David Morrissey sounded a lot like Liam Neeson on occasion when he's trying to hide his accent.
I thought the same
That's
thing.
amazing, because I was going to say I got a total Liam Neeson vibe off of David Morrissey, especially in the more brutal scenes where Liam Neeson can just go from smiling and charming to like where he played Ra's al Ghul or whatever, from benevolent to evil in a drop of a dime. I just thought I got a real Liam Neeson vibe off of him seeing him work as the governor, and it's a very different portrayal from what we're used to, what we probably expected from reading the comic, but I do approve.
When he was interrogating the pilot in that laboratory, I half expected him to tell the pilot that he had a very particular set of skills. That's a Taken reference. I still have not seen the first Taken.
Oh man, yeah, you gotta do that.
I will watch it tonight when we're done, I promise you. Okay, so he lies to the town, and then he leaves and heads on back to his abode.
Andrea stops him though after he makes his inspirational speech
Yeah, there was a
to the crowd, and he's like, and she kind of questions him a little bit more, and then he has that one line with her. He's like, "What's your real name?" And he says, "I never tell." And she says, "Never say never." And he looks at her and says, "Never."
Yeah.
And then walks away.
Yeah, that was a great scene.
And then we get the very last scene, which is chilling and very much out of the comic, and very, very telling about the character of the governor. He walks by a beautiful woman in his bed. He's got scotch in his hand. All this. He has the finest house in all of Woodbury, and he walks into this he looks at the family that he lost, in the zombie apocalypse in the picture. He takes a key around from his neck and opens the door to a secret room in the back. And this was pretty much right out of the comic.
Oh my gosh, I as soon as he walked in, I knew exactly what was going to happen, and I was shaking like a little girl on a first date. I mean, I was just so excited. And he sits down, and then you hear it. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Did you guys hear it?
No, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sorry.
As soon as he sits down, I could hear what sounded like fish tanks, water bubbling, and as soon as I heard that, I knew it. And we see the
Well, in the comic, aren't they televisions?
No.
They're like empty televisions. Okay, they are fish tanks.
yeah, they're fish tanks full of water, and inside the water are zombie heads, and they're on his.
The one like 3/4 shot from over his shoulder, looking at that wall of zombie heads. And actually, they aren't all zombie heads. They're heads of people he's had to kill too. Like the very last shot shows that Air Force pilot or that National Guard pilot.
Right.
That's one of the heads. It's like the new head in the tank.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking it's more like people he's had to kill to get to where he is, rather than zombies.
It might be. That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. I did see Michonne's pets in there. Apparently, when they found Michonne and Andrea, they collected the pets because we saw them and their heads because we saw them in the laboratory. And then in one of the tanks were the zombie heads of Michonne's pets. And then, like Jim said, at the very top was the pilot that he was interrogating. And that shot was definitely right out of the comics. This, for those of you who never read the book, it was at this point in the book when I thought, okay, this guy is completely bonkers. This guy is bad news. Nothing good can happen when this guy is involved with anything. There's an element in the comic, which I won't specify verbally here. I expected to see it. Maybe I didn't expect. I wanted to see it, and I think Jim and Russell know what I'm talking about. There's another character, we'll say, in the comic that we did not see in this episode. I wouldn't say I'm disappointed, but I kind of wanted to see what they might do. But like Jim said, there was another person in this place. It was a lady in the bed sleeping. I believe it was and we kind of blew past this earlier in the conversation. This was the lady that was leading Michonne and Andrea around the town, showing them this and that, explaining how the governor had really kind of solidified the townspeople into building a civilization again and things like that. I think that was that lady, don't you guys?
Yeah, I think you're right.
It would make sense.
It would, and I mean, she was on her stomach laying face down, and the reason I think it might be that is because of the way that lady was talking about the governor. Plus, it looked like the same hair, long straight brown hair. So anyway, and then the episode ends on that shot with what's the saying that Jim used it before we started recording? And I think didn't he say it in the comic book also?
It's a quote from a Bruce Springsteen song. Actually, it's 57 channels and nothing on.
Yeah.
That was the quote in the comic from the same scene.
In the comic book, there was 2 or 3 times as many fish tanks with heads in it, but it still gets the point across. This guy's not all right. He's not firing on all sides. He's a taco short of combos. What this guy is.
I just couldn't believe they did it. That they showed it on TV. I thought that would be something they would leave out, and I did not believe that they would bring that out and have it as the end of the episode. But they totally did. I'm glad they did because it really punctuates how messed up the governor really is and how messed up it's going to get as the season goes on.
Yeah, I don't think there's any other punctuation that they could have used to drive the point home as far as it needed to be driven. I was just so very completely. I'm thinking about that scene now. I've got goosebumps.
I backed it up and watched it again. I was like, that's too awesome. I got to see that twice.
And like Jim said earlier, we didn't see hide nor hair of Rick, Lori, Carl, Glenn, all them guys. And this was the first time that Andrew Lincoln and Sarah Wayne Callies were not in an episode of The Walking Dead.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I kind of like one of the things we talked about when we covered season 2 was we almost wished that they would have taken this approach to some degree. Like they would have split the group off or had an episode focused on one aspect or the other. So to kind of advance things along and not have it kind of short shrift some of the characters like it did. I mean, we saw that I guess with the one episode with Daryl.
18 Miles Out.
No,
Oh,
with,
I'm sorry, that was
when Daryl was
Turkey
right.
Rose.
And then the 18 Miles Out was another one. But with all of the, even though it was a smaller tight knit group, there were kind of a lot. There was a lot of little stories going on. Maggie and Glenn, and then you had Daryl and Carol, and Shane and Rick and Lori. All these Herschel, all these things going on. So I really thought it was cool, especially with Woodbury and the governor being a very separate and distinct environment than Rick and his counterparts in the jail. And I like that they found a good bridge with that, with having Andrea and Michonne kind of be that bridge. So they didn't completely throw us into this new environment with only Merle, who we haven't seen for well over a season. So we kind of keep those characters to give there are point of view characters into this town in this environment. So I kind of like that. And I think next week we're going to get more of a mixed bag. But yeah, I appreciated the break this week, so to speak.
Let me read Jordan's thoughts. He emailed them to us because he knew that he would not be able to join us because of the storm. He says, "Love the governor. I thought the changes they made to his character were great. He comes off as an almost awesome guy until the end. Milton, the scientist/T guy, like Jim said, was a great nod to Day of the Dead with the way he performs experiments on the zombies. He also loved the lab set. It was a nice change from the rest of the places shown in the episode. It was like the one place until the end when we see the governor's secret room, but it was like the one creepy place in all of the town.
Yeah, definitely.
Merle was great. This was the first time we've seen the real Merle. The first 3 times he was high, suffering from heat stroke and hallucination. Real Merle is still a bad guy, but at least he's not a cartoon character. Michonne was good, and maybe a bit too one note in this episode. She was so nice and bubbly on The Talking Dead, but to see her here just in, quote, angry eyes mode the whole time was a bit boring. Hopefully they give her more depth as the show moves on, and I'm sure they will. Woodbury is Truman Show level creepy, and I like it.
Awesome.
John was supposed to, he wanted to call in briefly, and I sent him a text message, but apparently his phone ran out of juice because we haven't heard from him, so we're hoping he's okay up there.
Yeah, I imagine,
and Jordan too.
Yeah, I imagine the cell towers are probably just getting hammered, between, regular, power being down and phone lines being down and everything else. Everybody's, calling to check on everybody. So imagine those cell towers are probably just getting beat pretty bad, so.
All I know is I'm about 400 miles away from where they are in the storm, and we're getting pounded with heavy wind and rain here, so
wow.
I can imagine what it'd be like there.
Yeah.
Courtney Robinson, a listener of the show and a friend of the Walking Dead TV podcast on Facebook, says, "Hey guys, just a few thoughts about last night's episode. I know a few people have said they were bored or that they missed Rick and company before watching the episode. I myself was worried about spending the entire episode in Woodbury, but I found myself sucked in from the minute that helicopter crashed and Merle showed up asking for hugs, to the ending with the crazy pants governor in his aquarium. It was interesting meeting other survivors. That being said, I definitely want to get back to the prison and Rick, and I'm wondering just how long it'll take these two groups to collide. It was great to see Merle back. Merle was an ass, but was an interesting character, even more so now. One thing I was curious about was the fact that Andrea was so freely spilling her guts about Rick and everyone else. After how freaked out everyone was back on the farm that when there was an outsider there, she thought she'd err more on the side of caution about giving out information about her former group. That being said, maybe she thinks they're all dead or long gone. She still has no idea what kind of threat her new friends might be. She seems totally ready to stick things out Woodbury, while only Michonne is reserving judgment. She gives it 4.5 busters." You got something, Russ?
Yeah, I got an email from Mr. Aaron Newworth from Out Now with Aaron and Abe, a podcast you can find on the HHWLD Podcast Network. He says, "Hey dudes, this is another great episode of The Walking Dead, further showing off how things have greatly improved for the series overall. This week's choice of taking a break from the dictatorship and switching gears to Andrea and Michonne as they meet the governor in the quaint little town known as Woodbury was a great one, and the kind of thing that should keep anyone intrigued by the series, by where the series is going. Some big highlights for him. He said the governor is here and he's a bad man. After keeping up the ruse that everyone knew would come to an end at some point, we see his villainous nature come out, firmly establishing him as a guy not to be trusted no matter how warmly he presents himself. Merle is back and technically better than ever. While for showing up as a ridiculous stereotype, the series has grown enough where his presence is less of a broad interference and more of an imposing figure. Andrea's on board for now, despite some early reservations. She seems to be convinced by the governor's spiel. Of course, as she learns herself, he'll never tell what's really going on. What is going on? Dr. Milton seems to be experimenting on the dearly dispatched pets Michonne had in tow, which we talked about earlier as well. Michonne always has her stuff together. While Michonne has reasons not to be convinced, I was not quite convinced with her. By that I mean it's time to flesh her out more, as she can't just be a badass all the time. Hopefully we'll get more on her soon. Has a character said her name out loud yet?
Yes, actually, we heard Andrea say it this episode
Yeah.
as they were being carted in. And I think Andrea said it in the season premiere when we saw a little bit of them.
Yeah, I don't remember that then, but I only saw it the one time, so it's highly possible as well. But yeah, I do remember her saying it this week. 4.5 Busters overall, a really strong episode that does a lot by focusing on one key part of the story. Looking forward to seeing how the Woodbury wreckers and the prison pioneers eventually come to find each other and most likely face off. P.S. I know it's in the comic too, but you think the governor has his aquarium as a tribute to the floating heads in Futurama?
I've never seen Futurama, so I can't comment on that.
Oh,
You're a Simpsons fan, but you've never seen Futurama.
Well,
Off the
technically I'm not a Simpsons fan either. It rarely makes me laugh.
Futurama would.
I'll tell you this. I'll tell you what. No, I've seen one episode of Futurama, and I sat there the whole time without laughing, and I did not give it another chance. Early seasons of The Simpsons made me laugh greatly. The last 10 years or so have been not up to my standards, so I just stopped watching.
Yeah, you may have caught it on off night. There's a lot of episodes that you would probably laugh hysterically. But one of the
Star Trek episode alone,
Yeah.
I think, would put you in
yeah,
stitches.
exactly. One of the big tropes.
With Welshie.
You're talking Futurama?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well maybe I'll give it another chance.
One of the big tropes with Futurama is all of these people from our era. You know, it takes place at the year 3000, and the main character falls asleep or is in cryo freeze and wakes up in the year 3000. But all of the people that were like famous in our lifetimes are all preserved as talking heads in a jar. So like the entire cast of Star Trek, Richard Nixon's a big one that always shows up. Just everybody is a head in a jar. I think Lincoln is. It's really funny how they use him sometimes. I mean, I think in one episode Nixon put his head on a robot body and ran around saying Nixon smash. So yeah, it's funny. It's
Well, do you think the answer to Aaron's question would be no, it's not a tribute to the heads in Futurama, but perhaps Robert Kirkman using it in the comic was? Because that happened first?
No, yeah, that's very possible. Yeah, it could be another case of art imitating life imitating art, but or art imitating art, I guess. Yeah, that's very, very possible.
Russell, what about you? How many busters?
I give this one 4. And I've been pretty generous and high in the rankings for the last 2, and then with the finale in season 2. But this was a good, solid episode. There wasn't anything that really put me off. I do agree that I would like to see Michonne start to grow a little more as a character, but I also think that you can tell there's a lot going on inside of there, like the way she looks and her eyes moving around. There's more that she's not saying, obviously, than she is saying. So that keeps me intrigued. As far as the governor goes, I talked earlier that I would elaborate on this, but I like the fact that they're not making him a one-note type of villain. And I think as nasty and as dastardly as he was in the comic, and I'm not going to spoil anything, and I think just because of the nature of how long he was on the show or in the book and what they were trying to achieve or what Kirkman was trying to achieve in the book, he became somewhat one note pretty quickly. I mean, once the switch was made, he pretty much just became this reprehensible, irredeemable type of person. And because of who they cast in this role and the way they've written him so far, I think they're going for a bit of a different take with this version of the governor. Somebody that is going to keep the viewer guessing as to what his real motivations are. Is he really a horrible person? Does he really have is he really just kind of taking Rick's philosophy to the next level? I think there's going to be some interesting confrontation coming up between the two of them and their styles. And it'll be interesting to see how twisted this version of the governor gets, or if they keep that in the background for a while. So I'm very excited for what they're going to bring to the show with these two very different camps and the way that each one's being run, and the fact that Rick and his group are kind of struggling for survival and live in these poor conditions, even though from their perspective it's a lot better than what they went through. But here you have Woodbury as this idyllic, in a post-apocalyptic world, this idyllic setting where people sleep in real beds and there's medicine and there's food and and people talk to each other and they're not afraid and things like that. So I'm very excited for what's to come.
Jim Dietz.
I give it a 4/5. I liked it a lot. I like the new governor. I like the new take on the governor. I like how it's painting it in shades of gray rather than just painting it in black. It's just a straight up villain. It's almost like parts of the governor are appealing and parts of him are not. And definitely has the flavor of the character from the comic, but it's definitely a different take, and I like that a lot. I thought it was cool that we got to break away from the dictatorship for a little bit. I really wish they, like Russ was saying before, I wish they would do more episodes so they'd break off with just following 2 or 3 characters at a time on their own story. Just because sometimes it's hard to write really well for that whole ensemble cast and have everyone actually have a contribution into it. So I hope they do more episodes where they break off like a few characters like that. It was cool to see Woodbury through that perspective from Andrea and Michonne showing up there. And like Russ, I'm excited for what's to come. So 4/5.
I'm right there with Jim. I'm giving 4.5 busters. I was thrilled with this episode. I was hesitant when it started. I didn't miss Rick and his group at all during this thing. Even though I kind of had some ideas of where this episode would go, I was still surprised, especially when he drove up to the military outpost and just pulled a gun out of nowhere. I mean, I should have seen that coming, but I didn't, and it shocked the TV viewer in me. Didn't shock the comic reader, but anyway, we're talking about the show. I loved it. The governor, David Morrissey, thrilled, like I said, with his portrayal. I really like, I expected one thing with the governor. I think John and I had talked a long time ago about, wanting Danny Trejo to play the governor because he resembles the man in the comic, but I couldn't be more happier with David Morrissey and this new, like Jim said, this new take on the governor. So I'm giving it 4.5 busters. So good. Just, you could tell it's like, just like Aaron said, it's a very Truman Show thing going on. It's just, there's something about this area. And, we're all comic book fans, we're all superhero fans. One of our big complaints with some superhero movies is the time devoted to the setup of the character or the origin of the main character. This felt like the perfect setup to the other half of this Walking Dead story. It didn't drag. There wasn't too much information. There wasn't not enough. There was, it's not a 2-parter. This was a one and done. This is the way it is. This is who this guy is. This is who they think he is, but this is who he really is. And it was just well done. It was perfect for me. I thought about giving it 5, but I want to reserve that for those extra special episodes. I loved it. Let me ask you this: if we rewound
I don't know, 4 years ago or plus, before this was even the Walking Dead TV show was even a possibility, and we would have said or been told that Shane's going to stick around for a lot, quite a bit longer than he did in the comic. They're not going to follow that route. They're going to bring these other characters in that didn't exist in the comic. The governor is going to be portrayed this way and not that way. Do you think we'd be poo-pooing the show pretty hard? And then contrast that with how much we're enjoying it because of the deviations and because of the changes that Kirkman is making on the fly to the show. I just think as comic book fans, it's almost like I'm glad that we're wrong in so far.
I think geeks are predisposed to being protective of what they love, of being critical of new interpretations of what they love. The new Spider-Man movie made me absolutely insane because I love Spider-Man. That's my thing. Spider-Man is my guy. You don't mess with Spider-Man. And to answer your question, I think if we had known what they were going to do with the show 4 years ago, I may not have even given it a chance. I wanted a strict interpretation of the show. And like you said, I'm so thankful that that's not what we're getting. So yeah, I really do think I wouldn't have been happy back then. It would have been too much information to handle.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think if you're too slavish to your source material, you end up with the movie Watchmen by Zack Snyder. I like this interpretation, and I'm glad it's deviating from page and chapter from the comic.
I am too. My 18-year-old has just started book 3 of the comic, the hardback of the comic. So that would be with issue 25 is what that starts with.
Yeah. So that'd be like.
So she's just now getting into the governor storyline. I said there's gonna be some differences. Don't let that throw you off. You're gonna run into some different characters. She's met Tyrese. We haven't met Tyrese on the show. That kind of thing. So, but she loves it, and my mom loves it. Gosh, she was really upset when she found out she wasn't gonna be able to watch it on her dish. But now that it's back, she's thrilled. This is a good time to be a geek fan of all kinds of things. There's so much going on geeky wise that has been good, and this Walking Dead, in my opinion, is good. We have some common friends and acquaintances who don't really care for this, and that kind of blows my mind. I know it blows some people's mind that I don't find the Watchmen comic interesting or worth reading again. I understand that, but I'm seeing it from my side of the fence now. It's like I don't understand how you don't like this show. It's fine, I get it, but it's just so good to me. I'm just so happy with it.
Well, our Facebook friends on our Facebook group for the Walking Dead TV podcast agree with you, Brad. Terry gives it a 4.25 because I give it a 4.25 pieces of drool coming out of the governor's mouth as he beats someone. We also had 5 out of 5 from Mike Jones, 5 out of 5 busters. Mary gave it a 4.8. Granted, this is mostly due to the fact that I've been waiting for the introduction of the governor, so my excitement might skew the rating for the better. A lot of people really are enjoying David Morrissey's version of the governor, just like we said we did. Michael gave us a solid 4.5. Howdy Michonne's. Did she look ready to hop across that table and choke out the governor, or what? And that's a very Michonne thing to do. That would have been a very Michonne thing to do. And then Rob Toll gave us a 4 out of 5 buster, or gave the show 4 out of 5 busters. Great introduction of the governor. Obviously didn't realize we hadn't seen Rick and the others at all until the preview for next episode came on. So thanks for, we have a really active group on Facebook. If you want to follow us there, Walking Dead TV Podcast, just type it in and join the group and check it out.
Some of our Twitter followers have commented, the sleeve PSU says, meet the governor. Suddenly the walkers seem a lot less menacing, huh? 3.5 busters. Jimmy in Georgia says, a great character-driven episode, 4.5 busters. He says, I was expecting a different zombie ending, not Futurama. So he obviously made that connection as well.
Yeah.
Crispy Lunkett says, 4.25 busters. Solid ending. What's in the tea? He thought about that too. Ali MB says, definitely worth 5 busters. I'm so glad they're evening out screen time between characters. And Meg Stewart says, great show, lots of stuff in the comic, though I want the governor to be even more menacing and creepy. 4 out of 5 for me. I would say, just give it a few episodes, Meg. He'll probably get there. You can follow us at WDTV Podcast on Twitter. Anything else, guys?
No, not that I can think of.
Well, Jordan usually does a wrap-up, and he's got like a boilerplate he likes to read, and...
Right, when there's no room left in hell and the dead walk the earth, remember.
Let's all do one. Let's all do one. Jim, go first.
When there's no more room in hell and the dead walk the earth, remember. Woodbury. It's a nice place to bring up your kids.
Russell.
This is tough.
That's why we missed Jordan.
Yeah.
John, not so much, but Jordan.
All right, so until there's no more room in hell and the dead walk the earth, remember, try not to grab Michael Rooker for an interview right after he's done a Q&A. You might not get what you think.
And when there's no more room in hell and the dead walk the earth, remember, keep that katana sharp, because you never know. That's dumb. It is hard. This is difficult. I don't know how he does it every year.
That's why he's Dr. Esquire.
Remember, don't drink the tea. Stay away from the tea and that creepy one building in the corner of the town. Stay away from that too.
If you want to hear the information for next episode, right after the end of the show, we will put that there, so you don't want to be spoiled. You don't have to listen to that part at all.